नमस्कार। जरा सोचिए, क्या हो अगर हम मन की उलझनों को, जिन्हें आज हम सिर्फ महसूस कर सकते हैं, कल उन्हें माप भी सकें। आज हम एक ऐसे ही क्रांतिकारी आइडिया के बारे में बात करने वाले हैं, एक ऐसा एआई सिस्टम जो मन को मापने का वादा करता है।
आज हम मन को समझने का प्रयास कर रहे हैं, कल हम उसे मापेंगे, समझेंगे और सुधारेंगे। ये सिर्फ एक कही सुनी बात नहीं है, बल्कि मेंटल हेल्थ केयर के भविष्य के लिए एक बहुत बड़ा विजन है। तो चलिए, सबसे पहले ये समझते हैं कि आखिर हमें इसकी जरूरत ही क्यों है।
देखिए, इस बड़े लक्ष्य तक पहुंचने से पहले आज की सच्चाई को समझना बहुत जरूरी है। मॉडर्न साइकियाट्री यानी मनोचिकित्सा में एक बहुत ही बुनियादी प्रॉब्लम है, और वो है मापने की समस्या।
और यहीं से एक बहुत बड़ा सवाल खड़ा होता है कि मेंटल हेल्थ केयर में क्या हम वाकई पूरी तस्वीर देख पा रहे हैं, या फिर जो हमारे मौजूदा तरीके हैं वो हमें कहीं अंधेरे में तो नहीं रख रहे।
देखिए, आज की चुनौती ना कई लेवल्स पर है। एक तरफ तो मेंटल हेल्थ का बोझ बढ़ता ही जा रहा है, और दूसरी तरफ डॉक्टरों के पास एक मरीज के लिए मुश्किल से 10 या 15 मिनट होते हैं। अब जरा सोचकर देखिए, इतने कम समय में बस एक छोटी सी बातचीत के आधार पर इतने बड़े बड़े फैसले लिए जाते हैं। और असल में यही सबसे बड़ी कमी है। हम मन को बिना मापे ही उसे समझने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं।
तो इसी समस्या के जवाब के तौर पर एआई थर्ड आई का कॉन्सेप्ट सामने आता है। इसे सिर्फ एक टेक्नोलॉजी की तरह मत समझिए, ये एक नई दृष्टि है, एक सत्य की आंख। इसका असली मकसद क्या है, चलिए देखते हैं। ये सिस्टम ना एक बहुत ही फंडामेंटल बदलाव लाना चाहता है। देखिए, एक तरफ है आज की दुनिया, जहां सब कुछ व्यक्तिपरक है, मतलब 10 मिनट की बातचीत पर निर्भर। और दूसरी तरफ है आने वाला कल, एक डेटा ड्रिवन हेल्थ केयर जो 24 घंटे सातों दिन मरीज के असली बर्ताव को कैप्चर करे। ये अंदाजों से हटकर पुख्ता जानकारी की तरफ एक बहुत बड़ा कदम है। तो ये सत्य की आंख असल में करती क्या है? इसका सबसे पहला काम है फैसले लेने में ऑब्जेक्टिविटी, यानी कि वस्तुनिष्ठता लाना। ये रोजाना मरीज की मानसिक हालत को ट्रैक करती है, उसके पैटर्न को पहचानती है और डॉक्टरों को साफ साफ दिखाती है कि जो इलाज चल रहा है उसका कोई असर हो भी रहा है या नहीं।
ओके, तो सबसे बड़ा सवाल ये है कि आखिर ये सिस्टम किसी के व्यवहार को एक मापने लायक स्कोर में बदलता कैसे है। आइए अब इसके काम करने के तरीके को समझते हैं। तो ये पूरा प्रोसेस शुरू होता है एक देखभालकर्ता यानी कि केयरगिवर से। अब ये केयरगिवर परिवार का कोई सदस्य भी हो सकता है या कोई हेल्थ वर्कर भी। उनका काम होता है हर दिन मरीज के व्यवहार को इन 5 जरूरी पैमानों पर सिस्टम में दर्ज करना, जैसे उनके विचारों में कितनी स्थिरता है या उनकी सोचने समझने की क्षमता कैसी है। ये पूरी प्रक्रिया बहुत ही सिंपल 3 स्टेप्स में काम करती है। पहला, केयरगिवर रोज की ऑब्जर्वेशंस को सिस्टम में डालता है। दूसरा, एआई का स्कोर इंजन इन सभी जानकारियों को मिलाकर एक रियलिटी स्कोर बनाता है। ये स्कोर आप कह सकते हैं एक इंडिकेटर है कि मरीज हकीकत से कितना जुड़ा हुआ है। और तीसरा, डॉक्टर अपने डैशबोर्ड पर इस स्कोर के ट्रेंड्स, पैटर्न और अलर्ट्स देखकर बेहतर फैसले ले पाते हैं।
लेकिन रुकिए, ये कहानी सिर्फ एक ऐप तक सीमित नहीं है। इसका विजन, इसकी महत्वाकांक्षा बहुत बड़ी है। इसमें एक नेशनल हेल्थ इंटेलिजेंस मिशन का हिस्सा बनने की क्षमता है। और हाँ, इसे लागू करने का एक पूरा रोड मैप भी तैयार है। सबसे पहले देहरादून और एनसीआर में 50 मरीजों के साथ एक पायलट स्टडी होगी। अगर वो सफल रही तो इसे राज्य के अस्पतालों तक ले जाया जाएगा, और फिर फाइनली इसे देश भर के सरकारी अस्पतालों, टेलीमेडिसिन और यहां तक कि बीमा सिस्टम के साथ जोड़ने का लक्ष्य है। अब जाहिर सी बात है, इतने बड़े मिशन के लिए शुरुआती फंडिंग तो लगेगी ही। जो 2 से 5 करोड़ रुपए का शुरुआती अनुदान है, उसका इस्तेमाल मुख्य रूप से टेक्नोलॉजी बनाने, पायलट स्टडी को चलाने और इसके नतीजों को वैज्ञानिक तौर पर वैलिडेट करने में किया जाएगा।
अच्छा, अब एक बहुत ही जरूरी सवाल पर आते हैं, क्या ये एआई डॉक्टरों की जगह ले लेगा? तो देखिए, इस सिस्टम को बनाने वाले इस बात को लेकर बिल्कुल साफ हैं। यहाँ एआई का काम सपोर्ट करना है, किसी की जगह लेना नहीं।
और इसीलिए इस सिस्टम को मनोचिकित्सा के लिए एक राष्ट्रीय निर्णय समर्थन प्रणाली कहा गया है। इसका सीधा सा मतलब है कि ये डॉक्टरों के अनुभव की जगह नहीं लेगा, बल्कि उन्हें और भी बेहतर फैसले लेने में मदद करेगा, उन्हें सपोर्ट करेगा।
और इसे सुनिश्चित करने के लिए कुछ बहुत ही कड़े नियम बनाए गए हैं। पहला, आखिरी फैसला हमेशा डॉक्टर का ही होगा। दूसरा, सिस्टम अपने आप कोई दवा नहीं लिखेगा। तीसरा, मरीज का डेटा हर हाल में सुरक्षित और गोपनीय रखा जाएगा, और ये सब कुछ एक मजबूत एथिकल एआई फ्रेमवर्क के तहत ही होगा। तो कुल मिलाके इस पूरे प्रोजेक्ट का एक ही मकसद है साइकैट्री जैसे फील्ड में ऑब्जेक्टिविटी लाना, जो दशकों से सिर्फ व्यक्तिपरक व्याख्याओं पर ही निर्भर रहा है। और ये पूरी बातचीत हमें एक बहुत बड़े सवाल पर लाके छोड़ देती है। जैसे जैसे एआई हमारी जिंदगी के सबसे निजी हिस्सों में आ रहा है, हम डेटा की ताकत और इंसानी सूझबूझ के बीच सही बैलेंस कैसे बनाएंगे? ये एक ऐसा सवाल है जिस पर हम सभी को सोचने की जरूरत है।
Usually when you go in for a medical diagnosis, there's this comforting expectation of precision.
Oh, absolutely.
It's almost like engineering, right?
Yeah.
If you break your arm, the X-ray shows that jagged white line, and the doctor just points at the screen and says, well, there it is. Or they take your blood pressure, read the numbers, and tell you exactly where you fall on a universally agreed upon chart.
Right. It's binary. It's quantifiable. And I mean, that is incredibly comforting for both the patient and the physician. We like things to be visible. We want them neatly categorized and measurable. It kind of gives us a sense of control over, biological chaos.
Yeah, exactly. But then you step into the world of mental health and psychiatry, and suddenly that X-ray machine is it's completely broken.
Totally.
We're dealing with human consciousness, which doesn't exactly fit onto a simple bar chart. So we're looking at a diagnostic landscape that is, honestly, incredibly murky.
It is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters. And the stakes couldn't be higher when you're trying to treat the human mind without a clear, objective map.
Which is why the project we're exploring in today's deep dive is so radical. We've got a comprehensive policy pitch, a highly detailed funding blueprint, and the actual technical architecture documents for a project called AI.3.IE.
Specifically, their psychiatric reality tracker, or the PRT.
Right, the PRT. And they are literally trying to build an X-ray for the human mind using back-end code and continuous data tracking. Okay, let's unpack this. Set the stage for us. If I'm a patient or a doctor right now, what is the fundamental broken mechanic that this technology is trying to fix?
Well, to really understand the tech, you have to look at the severe two-pronged crisis outline in the pitch documents. First, we are facing a rapidly rising mental health burden globally, and specifically in India, which is, the primary target of this proposal.
Right.
And second, there is a massive shortage of trained psychiatrists to actually handle that burden. So supply and demand are critically misaligned.
That makes sense.
But the real foundational flaw, the founder points out, the reason the system itself is breaking down, is how diagnosis actually happens in practice.
Right, because it's not like swabbing a throat for strep.
Far from it. Current psychiatric diagnosis relies heavily on what a patient says or what a doctor observes during a brief 10 to 15-minute clinical interaction.
Wow, that's short.
It is. It's a highly subjective snapshot taken maybe once a month.
It's like trying to write a comprehensive review for a complex 3-hour feature-length movie, but you're only allowed to watch a random 15-second clip.
That's a great way to put it.
And maybe that clip happens to be the one moment the main character is smiling and laughing, even though the rest of the movie is a dark tragedy. If I'm the reviewer, or in this case, the doctor, I'm going to base my entire assessment on a completely unrepresentative sample.
That analogy perfectly captures the danger here. I mean, human emotion and mental states are wildly dynamic. If a doctor is basing a treatment plan on that 15-minute snapshot, it leads to severe risks of either over-medication or under-medication.
Yeah, that's terrifying.
They're forced to make profound neurochemical decisions, like prescribing powerful antipsychotics or antidepressants, without any sort of continuous monitoring system to see what actually happens when the patient goes home.
And if the medicine isn't working, or is actually making things worse, the doctor might not know for another month until the next appointment.
Exactly. And the pitch documents use a very poignant phrase for this specific gap in care. They say the current system leaves patients to suffer in invisible silence.
Invisible silence.
Wow. Yeah, the suffering is happening, the side effects are happening, the reality breaks are happening, but because the doctor isn't there to witness them, they just remain unrecorded and untreated.
Invisible silence. That hits hard.
Yeah.
But I have to push back here for a second.
Sure.
As beautiful as this idea of tracking sounds, we are talking about an app on a smartphone. Can a machine really capture the nuances of human emotion, trauma, and subjective reality better than a trained, empathetic human doctor? Like, are we really pretending a piece of software understands depression better than a psychiatrist?
What's fascinating here is that the proposal explicitly says No, it cannot, and it shouldn't even try to.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the goal of AI.3, YE, is not for the machine to understand human emotion better than a doctor. The goal is to provide that doctor with a 200/7 baseline of behavioral reality.
Okay, I see.
The system is positioned to replace those isolated, subjective interpretations with a transparent, data-driven foundation. So it's not replacing the doctor's empathy, it's giving their empathy a factual, continuous canvas to work on.
Okay, so what does this all mean? If the problem is relying on a 15-minute snapshot, the logical solution is continuous measurement. It sounds kind of like a Fitbit, but for mental reality instead of physical steps.
That's pretty close, actually.
But how on earth do you put a numerical score on human consciousness? How do you quantify the invisible? Because if I'm feeling paranoid or deeply lethargic, those aren't exactly things you can put on a digital scale.
Well, this is where the mechanics of the psychiatric reality tracker, the PRT app, become really crucial. And the most important detail in the architecture document is who is actually holding the phone and using the app.
Okay.
While patients and doctors are part of the ecosystem, the daily data entry is primarily driven by the caregiver. The system identifies the family member or caregiver as the primary user.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Because if someone is experiencing a severe break from reality or, deep paralyzing depression, asking them to objectively log into an app and rate their own mental state is inherently flawed. You can't ask a broken instrument to calibrate itself.
Precisely the logic. The caregiver acts as the objective observer. And the app doesn't just ask them to write a diary entry, it breaks mental health down into 5 specific, highly measurable domains.
Okay, what are they?
First is thought stability. This looks at things like suspicion levels and whether the patient can maintain a logical conversation. Second is perception, which is heavily focused on tracking the frequency and intensity of hallucinations.
Okay, so that's 2. Thought stability and perception. What are the others?
Third is functionality, which measures productive hours and task completion percentages. Fourth is behavior, logging actual minutes of social interaction, irritability levels, and hours of sleep.
Right.
And finally, cognitive ability, which measures focus duration and memory recall.
Okay, got it. So they're taking abstract concepts like how with it someone is and forcing them into sliders and numbered inputs. And the sources detail a specific score engine.
They do, yeah.
It creates a composite score out of 100. So if I'm the caregiver, my inputs are feeding into an algorithm where, let's see, thought stability and functionality are heavily weighted at 25% each, perception at 20%, and so on. You end up with a daily mental score.
Exactly. You get a daily number that reflects the patient's state over the last 24 hours.
But here's my issue with the caregiver being the primary user. Imagine you're the one caring for a sick family member. It is grueling work. If the caregiver is the one inputting this daily data, how does the system account for the caregiver's own emotional biases?
That's a fair point.
Or just caregiver fatigue? If I've been taking care of someone for 6 months, I might be utterly exhausted. I might rate their thought stability terribly on a Tuesday morning just because we had a minor argument over breakfast. Doesn't this whole system just swap out the doctor's 15-minute subjectivity for the caregiver's exhausted subjectivity?
It's a highly valid concern, and it's something the architecture attempts to mitigate through the actual design of the inputs. If you look at the software requirement specification in the sources, the system actively avoids asking the caregiver, how does the patient feel today?
Because that invites bias.
Right. Instead, it asks for structured, quantifiable inputs. How many hours of sleep did they get? How many minutes of social interaction occurred? How many productive hours?
Sure. Sleep is a hard number. I can look at a clock and say they slept for 4 hours.
Oh.
But what about social interaction? If my mother sits silently in a room while 3 other people talk, is that social interaction? There's still a massive gray area there. You can't completely engineer the human interpretation out of the caregiver.
That's absolutely true, but there's a crucial distinction in how the AI uses this data. The system isn't making life or death diagnostic decisions based on your interpretation of one silent Tuesday. By taking this data daily, the focus shifts from isolated incidents to recognizable trend lines over time.
Trend lines.
So think of it like navigating a ship. Right now, psychiatrists are trying to steer by looking at the stars once a month through a cloudy telescope. This PRT system is trying to give them real-time GPS coordinates, input by the deckhands who are actually living on the ship.
Okay, I like that. So even if my definition of social interaction is slightly skewed, as long as I am consistently skewed, the system can still detect a drop-off.
Exactly. The AI is looking for standard deviations from the patient's own established baseline. A single bias entry gets smoothed out by the statistical reality of the week or the month. If the patient goes from 60 minutes of your definition of social interaction down to 0 for 4 days straight, coupled with a drop in sleep well, the trend line is undeniable, regardless of the internal bias.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me, because the sources we're looking at aren't just theoretical white papers philosophizing about mental health. They include a full, production-grade technical architecture.
Oh, it's incredibly detailed.
We're talking about a React front-end for the app, a Node.js backend to handle the logic, and a PostgreSQL database. And they don't just gloss over the data they're using PostgreSQL specifically because it handles structured relational data perfectly.
No.
They're treating these daily behavioral logs with the same rigor a bank treats financial transactions.
The technical blueprint is incredibly rigid. They even outline the security protocols, specifying JSON web tokens for authentication and AES-256 encryption.
And they have to use military-grade encryption like AES-256 because, I mean, if a database holding your literal mental stability scores and hallucination logs gets breached, that is catastrophic.
Unthinkable, really.
It is deeply practical. There are even literal terminal commands included in the documents to build the mobile app using modern frameworks like Capacitor and Lovable. They aren't waiting for a 10-year research grant. They want this built now.
And that robust, highly secure tech stack is absolutely necessary because of what they plan to do with the data once it's collected. It's not just a digital diary sitting passively on a server. The data feeds into what they call the AI layer.
Right, and the AI layer is where they introduce the concept of the truth index. This is easily the most fascinating insight in the entire blueprint. The truth index is designed to measure a patient's deviation from reality. Can you break down how that actually works mathematically? Because putting a number on truth sounds impossible.
It revolves around measuring the delta, the gap between perception and reality. Let's look at a hypothetical scenario based on their metrics. Imagine a patient who feels they are doing incredibly well. If you ask them, they say they are highly functional and completely stable. But the caregiver's daily logs show that the patient hasn't slept in 48 hours, their productive hours are at 0, and they've documented severe spikes in paranoia.
For the patient's internal narrative is completely detached from their external behavioral data.
Exactly. The AI layer calculates that detachment. As the gap between the expected behavioral baseline and the actual recorded metrics widens, the truth index drops. It flags that the patient's reality is fracturing.
Wow.
And the system goes even further with pattern matching. The document gives an example where the system might flag a patient's data pattern and tell the doctor, this specific pattern of sleep loss and cognitive decline is an 82% match with historical cases that improved by using the drug aripiprazole.
Wait, so it's actively suggesting pharmacological pathways based on data comparisons.
Yeah.
And it issues predictions, right? The sources mention an expected improvement in 14 days, or it can issue a high-risk alert if it detects an anomaly that suggests a sudden relapse.
It does. It moves from passive tracking to active predictive intelligence.
Okay, but let me jump in here and play devil's advocate for a second.
Go ahead.
If we have an app on a smartphone that is telling a family there will be an expected improvement in 14 days, or issuing a blaring high-risk alert based on an algorithm analyzing sleep and hallucinations, aren't we crossing into somewhat dangerous sci-fi territory? Like, we are letting algorithms dictate health outcomes and potentially inducing panic in a household based on a math equation.
This raises an important question about the balance between AI automation and human judgment. It is so easy to look at predictive algorithms in healthcare and see a dystopian future. But if we look closely at the Layer 4 risk engine logic detailed in the sources, it demystifies the sci-fi aspect a bit.
How so?
The logic is surprisingly grounded. It's essentially if-then conditional statements on a massive scale. For example, IF hallucinations increase by a certain percentage, IND sleep decreases below a specific threshold over 3 days, then risk equals high GH.
Oh, I see. So it's basically automating the exact same red flags a human doctor would look for anyway.
Yes, but it's doing it at a scale and speed that the human brain literally cannot process. A doctor looks at one patient's file during a 15-minute visit. This AI is comparing your mother's sleep and cognitive data against tens of thousands of identical historical cases in real time.
Right.
It's looking at those data sets and saying, historically, when these 3 specific metrics drop simultaneously, a severe relapse occurs within 48 hours. It's not dictating health. It's providing clinical intelligence that was previously invisible.
Which brings us to a massive hurdle. Because having a brilliant tech stack, a clever scoring engine, and a predictive truth index is completely useless if the medical establishment looks at it and rejects it. Doctors are highly trained experts. They don't traditionally love algorithms second-guessing their prescriptions.
No, they certainly do not.
So how is the founder ensuring this project actually sees the light of day in the real world?
The strategy outlined in these sources is a masterstroke in policy-level positioning. The founder, who is leveraging a background involving the Indian Institutes of Technology, specifically IIT, Roorkee, and government experience, is very explicit in their instructions. They insist, do not position this as a mental health app.
Right, because if you say mental health app, people think of something you download for free on the App Store to listen to calm meditation sounds or rain noises. It sounds lightweight.
Exactly. The instruction is to position it as a national decision support system for psychiatry. They are aligning the entire project with massive national infrastructure initiatives in India, like Digital India and NITI Aayog. They aren't just pitching to Silicon Valley venture capitalists. They are targeting government ministries, asking for 2 to 5 crore rupees in seed funding.
Which is roughly $250,000 to over $500,000 US dollars. And they aren't asking for that money to just run endless beta tests, right?
No, it's very specific.
The funding is intended for a highly structured 30-day pilot program in Dehradun, or the National Capital Region. They want to utilize 50 patients, 5 psychiatrists, and 50 caregivers. It's a highly targeted, contained deployment to prove the concept works in the real world.
They're treating it like national infrastructure. They know that to change healthcare, you need systemic buy-in from the top down.
It's like pitching a completely new nationwide highway system rather than just trying to sell a new model of a car. You're trying to change the very roads everyone drives on. But even with that high-level government positioning, there is still the human element at the clinic level.
Oh, for sure.
Will doctors actually embrace this? Imagine a seasoned psychiatrist looking at a dashboard that tells them the medication they prescribed last week is dropping the patient's cognitive score by 10%. Will they see that as clinical intelligence or a threat to their professional expertise?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the sources reveal that the founder anticipated this exact friction. They know that if doctors feel replaced or threatened, the system dies on arrival. That is why there is an entire section in the architecture dedicated to critical safeguards.
Capital letters, critical safeguards.
Yes, these are absolute, non-negotiable rules baked into the system's code. Rule number 1, no automedication. The AI will never, under any circumstances, prescribe or alter a dosage on its own. Rule number 2, the doctor always remains the final authority.
So the app might wave a red flag and say, hey, here is the data, the truth index is dropping.
Yeah.
But the doctor has to physically hit the button to change the treatment. The AI is a consultant, not the chief of medicine.
Exactly. The system is designed to empower doctors, not replace them. Imagine a doctor prescribing a new, powerful medication. Right now, they wait a month, the patient comes back, and the doctor asks, how do you feel? With the PRT system, the doctor opens a dashboard that provides a clear before versus after medication impact timeline. It breaks down the improvement mathematically. Maybe the drug improved thought stability by 30%, but the data shows cognitive focus dropped by 5%.
It actually validates the doctor's treatment plan with hard data. It gives them a shield. If a treatment works, they don't just have a patient saying, I feel better. They have mathematical proof to show the family. And if a treatment is failing or inducing severe side effects, they catch it in 10 days instead of 3 months.
It transforms the psychiatrist from a detective trying to piece together fragmented clues from a 15-minute conversation into a data-empowered clinical commander. They can see the entire battlefield of the patient's mind.
It's taking the guess out of the guesswork. So let's recap the journey we've taken today, because this touches on so many different facets of the future we are walking into. Whether you're a learner obsessed with how back-end tech infrastructure like PostgreSQL and React can be deployed at scale to solve real-world problems. Or maybe you're a caregiver who has felt the sheer exhaustion of trying to summarize your loved one's terrible, chaotic month to a doctor in 10 minutes. Or if you're just someone invested in the future of healthcare, this deep dive really illustrates a profound shift in how we might treat the mind.
It's a shift from subjective suffering to transparent, manageable care. By equipping the caregivers with structured inputs and giving the doctors real-time data, it bridges a gap that has existed in psychiatry for over a century.
The idea that we can use data to cure the invisible silence of mental illness is incredibly powerful. We're looking at a blueprint that takes the chaos of human mental struggles, the paranoia, the lethargy, the hallucinations, and translates it into a language that the medical system can actually process effectively.
It gives a voice to the subtle trends and behavioral patterns that usually go unnoticed until a crisis point is reached.
But as we wrap up, there is one final lingering question I want to leave you with to mull over on your own. We spent this entire deep dive talking about this system, quantifying mental states, establishing a truth index, and measuring a patient's deviations from reality.
Right.
It all sounds incredibly logical on paper. But if we successfully deploy a national system that puts a numerical score on psychiatric reality, who ultimately gets to decide what the perfect or normal baseline score is for human consciousness?
A very heavy, very necessary question as we begin to digitize the mind.
We started today talking about how comforting it is to look at an X-ray of a broken arm, to see that clear, jagged line and know exactly what is wrong. AI.3rd IIE is trying to build that X-ray machine for the human mind. But when the bones you are measuring are made of thoughts, perceptions, and behaviors, the machine reading the results is only as objective as the humans who programmed it.